the bodies of insects. It's a gross thing. It's a cute little mushroom, but it's gross. It actually overtakes and uses the bug's body. I've got pictures of all this stuff, but it's weird. And just 3 years ago, they discovered the first mushroom ever to be grown that grows solely underwater, which is incredible. It's in the Klamath River, and they thought it was on wood. They thought this can't be because they've never seen that before, but I've got a picture of it too. And then there's a smut that grows on corn. I never can say this word, but it's Hutalachi or something like that. It's a blue fungus that grows on corn, and actually a lot of people infect their corn crops purposely because it's, particularly in Mexico, it's so cherished that they want the fungus more, is worth a lot more than the corn itself. But you can find them in the deserts, you can find them, I was looking at slides last night, that only are in sand, that occur in really hot places. So anywhere from the forest, desert, near snowbanks, tundra, and even Yellowstone near the geysers in a real hot environment. So you can find them in lots of different environments. And here's just some examples of the things I just talked about, them growing on different substrates. So this is just a dead piece of wood, and this Callibia is breaking down the wood. So like I said, they're nature's recyclers. And this is Hebeloma. It's growing on a pine cone. Now, do I know what kind of tree it is? No, not yet. But I do know it's a Hebeloma. And here's a different one on a different pine cone. This is a Mycena. And look at this. This is a little tiny thing. This is on a leaf. It's actually growing on the stem and decomposing it. So if you look, like, it's interesting because our club has come here, all the time for 25 years. But in years when it's really dry, then instead of just picking the obvious ones, then we're really crawling around, and then we find these unusual things because we have to look harder. But it's actually decaying that leaf. So that's pretty cool. And here's a little mushroom growing on moss on the side of a tree. So they grow on all different kinds. And here, I believe, is cow dung, a coprinus growing on cow dung. Another one growing on a dead log, decomposing the log, growing on top of another mushroom. I mean, you just see all kinds of crazy stuff. Now this is weird. This hypomyces, the white part that you see, is actually hypomyces. It's a different kind of fungus. It's like a mold, and it actually takes over. It only uses the one or the other of these two genera, and it actually transforms the mushroom. In this mushroom, the Lactarius that you would normally see, I'm sure I have a Lactarius in here somewhere, that you'll see what one looks like. But it's a beautiful mushroom with gills underneath and everything. And this turns it into an edible wonder. I mean, it's hard to believe, but when it's done overtaking the mushrooms, it no longer has gills. It has big, long ridges. And I need to include a picture of what it looks like in its final stage, because that would be good. But it's weird. It's bright orange and it's delicious. So that it just overtakes it. And Cortinarius, they're mycorrhizal. So mushrooms come in every different color. Purple and green and orange and red and white and blue. And, it's just fun to be out in the woods and have an excuse to go out there and wander around. So. And it's just fun. Now here's the gross thing that I told you about, where they actually infect an insect. So you have this cordyceps, the mushroom spore. Most mushroom spores are dispersed by the wind. So this poor, what is this anyway? A fly?
A wasp.
A wasp. This had the mushroom spore landed on it, and then as the mushroom spore develops little hyphae and the mycelium come out, it invades the body of the insect and uses it instead of a dead tree or something to get the nutrients, and makes a fruiting body out of the dead insect. Now, come on. I mean, now that's pretty weird. So I've also got one, I think, of an ant. So here's a different cordyceps, and it depends on the species of ant, or the species of fly, or the species of wasp. So this, you can see the ant right here. It's dead, of course, and the cordyceps is growing right out of it. Anyway, it's just kind of fun. And here's the underwater one, Sarsaparilla aquatica, beautiful name. It fruits totally underwater, and the bubbles that you see underwater are carrying the spores and then dispersing them through the water. Oh, that's pretty fascinating. And here's the corn smut that I talked about, the purple-blue stuff. Is you can buy it in a can in stores, and the Mexicans use it a lot in their cooking, and it's supposed to be fabulous. So anyway, how we use fungi, of course fungi is yeast and all kinds of stuff, so we use it for the production of bread and cheese and wine and beer and alcohol, some antibiotics, even some chemotherapeutic drugs are produced. Actually, in that part of my life, the chemotherapeutic drug, the best one for breast cancer, is adriamycin, and it's a red fungus that grows on sheep dung. And that's how they figured it out, and it's actually the most, it's the best drug for breast cancer. And they've also planted, injected mycelium into oil spills, the Valdez nightmare thingamajig, and the mycelium actually absorbs and breaks down heavy metals and stuff, so they could use these at mining sites and oil spills and stuff. So, point well taken. If you see a mushroom on a golf course, because it absorbs all the poisons in its vicinity, I wouldn't eat them on golf courses or long roadways and stuff, you know, but because of that, because they really do absorb stuff. And they provide food for us and animals. And another thing, people will say, well, gee, I saw a bite taken out of this mushroom by a squirrel. It must be edible. Well, their system's a lot different than ours. So just because a critter is eating a little bit of it doesn't mean it's going to be good for us. Now, mild mushroom poisoning. Poisoning can be anything from nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, hallucinations, coma, convulsions, liver failure is what the amanitas cause. And the only treatment is liver transplant, and I don't know if you know much about that, but you know, most people, that doesn't work anyway because your body rejects somebody else's liver. So it's a you know, Russian roulette game trying to eat amanitas, in my opinion. And little brown mushrooms, it's just something that we talk about. It's an LBM, leave it alone. If it's a little brown mushroom, Galerina it does the same thing that amanitas do. They can kill you. Now, Coprinus ephraimarius is interesting because it's Coprinus comatus is shaggy mane. Have you guys seen those in your yards?
Yeah, they go on my horse manure.
Okay, yeah. So they're edible, and they're in the same family as this one, but they look a lot differently. But only this Coprinus has an antabuse reaction when you eat it either if you consume alcohol 24 hours before you eat it or 24 hours after you eat it, you'll just throw up constantly. It's not going to kill you, but you probably wish you were dead. And there's a story about some guys hunting out in the middle of the forest, and one of the guys said, "Oh, I recognize that mushroom, we eat it all the time." So they're drinking and stuff, so they eat it, and then they had to be helicoptered out because they were so sick. Well, they feel great, and then they have beer again the next night. Same thing happens. So it's one you want to stay away from, but it's not going to kill you. Now, this is what needs to ingrain on your mind here. The characteristics of the deadly species, and this should be in the handout, so you don't have to write all this stuff down, but amanitas have, the cap can be any different color. The cap can be green. Let's see what page this is on. Amanitas, if you do a spore print, Amanitas are going to have a white spore print, no matter what color anything else is. And in America, the gills are always white. So the gills are white. 90% of the time it's got a ring. 100% of the time it's got a vulva. There's only one other species that has this tissue at the bottom of the mushroom. But it's got white gills, white vulva, white stipe, and the cap can be pink, orange, yellow, red, green, white. The cap can be tons of different colors. And the gills are always white, or lamellae, the scientific term. The stipe is white. It's always got, almost always has a ring. There's one that doesn't. And it always has some kind of vulva. And what these patches are at the top, this, when I told you when it was an egg, and it breaks, and then the tissue stays at the bottom and creates the vulva, and then when the cap expands, it breaks. But also, the tissue that's on the top of the cap breaks into pieces and has these little white patches. And these patches, you can flick off because they're part of that universal veil that are not attached or not part of the surface area of the cap. Not all of them have it because sometimes the rain washes these off real easily, etc. But that's often a common characteristic. So don't forget it.
So what do you mean by when you said the spore print is white? I mean, how do you do or figure that out?
Well, when
You're getting to
when
that.
you want to do a spore print, you take the mushroom and you chop the cap off. Then you lay it on a white piece of paper. And this is a brown spored mushroom. And you can see the gills, at the very edge of each gill is where the spores are produced. And it releases thousands of spores. So it will produce a color. You mean you can't see the individual spore with your naked eye. And when I first started doing this, I thought I was really clever because there's basically light spored mushrooms and then dark spored mushrooms. So I took a piece of paper and I made stripes, black and white stripes, and then I put the mushroom cap on it. And Dr. Miller said to me, Kathy, that's not good at all because you're going to miss the spores that maybe have a little pink tinge or a little yellow tinge. On the black part of the paper, they're going to all look white. So he said, only do it on a white piece of paper. So I just used typing paper. But it's actually, you can see the structure of the mushroom. Just like this is a cousin to the store-bought mushroom. If you chop it in half and put it on a piece of paper and put a glass over it so the spores aren't dispersed by wind, you should just do it at home and just see. You'll get this exact same
So I'm
pattern.
still not clear where you cut it right below the cap?
Yep.
And then it's the cap that
You
you
put
down.
on the piece of paper, then you cover it with a bowl or a cup or something. Sometimes it takes a couple hours and sometimes it takes overnight.
So if you're doing a white piece of paper, how do you see white spores?
You can. It looks like baby powder, but you'll see that same pattern. If you look closely at it, you'll see lines and lines
So you
and
just
lines.
lay down the piece of paper and put the cap and cover it. You don't need anything else.
Nope, that's it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I have pictures, so I played around and somewhere in here is going to show pictures of the different colors of spore prints. And they really are different. I mean, if you compare them and once you kind of get to know them. But Amanitas always have a white spore print. And they're the purple mushroom that I showed you earlier, the really bright purple guy. There's an edible one that looks like that. But that one has a rusty brown spore print, and the other purple one will have a white spore print. So people say, is this the edible one? Did you do a spore print? You know, because you can always tell. So it's not as hard as people think. And this we've already talked about. Amanita, again, I'm just going to go over it. And the stipe of the Amanitas aren't always, you can't always see that cup or vulva very clearly. Sometimes it's like concentric rings, or it's just real bulbous and looks weird, but it looks weird. I mean, when you get it out of ground, it's not a regular uniform mushroom type. And like I said, the cap colors of Amanitas can be anything: white, pink, yellow, green, gray, red, orange. They can be all different colors. And they are truly the most beautiful mushroom out there. And we have tons of them around here. Yeah, I've seen them, particularly around Goose Lake. There'd just be rings of these beautiful red mushrooms. You know, they're just gorgeous. But it's the deadly species. Now here's a comparison. Now this is kind of the one in the children's book, you know, but it creates hallucinogenic properties. It may not kill you, and this is absolutely deadly. And notice it doesn't have any patches on the cap. So that's the pin. And look at the ring. If you handle these, you'll miss it. You maybe mess up the ring. So it almost looks like it doesn't have a ring. This one doesn't look like it has a ring. But look at that cup. You can't miss the cup. So you have to pay attention to these little characteristics that you see. But, so one is absolutely deadly and the other one's hallucinogenic. They don't eat the whole thing, but some people chew on the cap a little tiny bit. I don't know. I never was into that stuff.
You wear gloves when you handle Amanita?
No, and you have to ingest it for a mushroom to bother you. So handling the deadly ones doesn't do a thing. Yeah. But that's a good question to ask. And look at how much these look alike. One's deadly, one's edible. But, and see the patches are gone off that one, off both of them. But look at the yellow gills. And this is a European species, but there's a cousin we have in the U.S. on the East Coast that looks like this. And this is the egg that I was telling you about. Well, when it was a real little baby, it was all enclosed in white. That's where you get the patches at the top, when it breaks and expands and as it goes up. So that's what the egg looks like. And when if you find button Boletus edulis, they're little, they're all enclosed before the mushroom expands and grows up. And I myself, last year in the kitchen, I wouldn't have known until I cut it in half. So it's kind of creepy. So one must pay attention, but look how beautiful they are. Now here's one without a veil. It has no ring. It's got, and this, you know, the vulva is just a mess. It's not real clear. So if you dig this out of the ground or you cut it off here, you'd never see all this. So the vulva on the bottom is not always real clear, and this species has no ring. So a ring usually is there. And then in other parts of the world, the gills aren't white. They're all different colors. But in America, they're white, so that can be easy. And now look at this. Look at how these look similar. These are, again, is the button. This is in egg form, the Amanita in the egg form. And here is a puffball, which are edible. When you cut the puffball in half, it's going to look just like a marshmallow and be absolutely uniform. And when they're pure white inside, they're great to eat. In fact, they're fabulous. But you cut this in half, and you'll see the outline of a mushroom. You actually see the gills inside. And someday I'm going to take a picture of that and show you. I should have done that when I found those. But look how similar those are. So people mistake them a lot. So that's not a good thing. Now, when you cut the Amanita in half, you can see the little mushroom form. And the puffball you cut in half, now this is verging on not going to be great to eat because it's not white like a marshmallow. So what puffballs do is their spore mass is all in here. Unlike a normal mushroom that has the gills, the spores are along the gills, this just does it by shotgun method. You know, there are billions of spores in the spore mass here. So when the puffball, at its very beginning stages, it'll be pure white inside, and then it'll turn kind of yellowish, and then it'll turn kind of greenish, and then it'll get slimy, and then it dries out, and then it becomes like baby powder. and they have a hole in the top, and